probably see a Taekwondo guy and think, man, that's a Taekwondo guy, right?
So, yeah, that's definitely a Taekwondo guy.
Perfect.
Recently, Icy Mike and I had a talk about whether or not MMA was a style. And we essentially came to the conclusion that between his brain and mine, we have no idea. In that video, we got a comment from you, and I would love for you to elaborate on whether or not you think mixed martial arts is a style in itself now.
Okay, I can see why a lot of people would think it is. My answer was essentially no, it's not a style, it is a rule set. Now, that being said, if you look at different combat sports with different rule sets, you will see certain stylistic tendencies develop.
Yeah.
For example, if you look at the different kickboxing styles, okay, we have K1 kickboxing, Sanda, Lethwei, Muay Thai, Gwanggyokdo, all these other styles, many of which people have never heard of, Sabat, etc. But they're all kickboxing, right? And if you look at the way the fighters from these particular combat sports fight, you'll notice, okay, why are the Sanda fighters throwing lead leg side kicks to the head with this percussive force like it's a jab?
Yeah.
And the Muay Thai fighters aren't. And the reason is the rule set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That too. Yeah.
That high side kick like the jab sets up takedowns, which score you big points in Sanda. But in Muay Thai, they don't. And so in Muay Thai,
the kicks are all the
clinching,
points.
Extended clinching and extended knees. Why do you see so many knees specifically? Well, I'll tell you why. You ever been to Bangkok? Ever been to Thailand?
No, I have not.
Okay,
actually,
do yourself a favor.
I
When
am
international travel is an
planning
option
and
again.
going soon.
Yeah, go to
with the
Lumpini
coach.
Stadium. Go to Lumpini Boxing Stadium and sit in the front row. Get the expensive foreigner tickets and go in there. Just treat yourself. Sit in the front row and watch what happens when the fighters clinch up and start throwing knees. Every time a knee is thrown, everybody in the audience goes, "Wah!" and they just cheer wildly. It's like their favorite part of the sport.
It's the knees.
So why do the judges weigh that so heavily? It's a cultural thing. Okay? Anytime you award more points for something, you're going to see fighters gravitate toward that.
Of course.
Okay? Like, man, I'm a big advocate of trying to change rule sets in Jiu Jitsu to make it more interesting and more fun.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of IBJJF rules. I know it's the most popular rule set of Jiu Jitsu worldwide right now, unfortunately, in my estimation. But I've suggested, what if you just added one more point for a takedown? And then people would argue, well, that would change the sport completely. Because then people would either learn how to wrestle more and fight more for takedowns, or they would pull guard more quickly because they don't want to be taken down and lose the extra point.
Sure.
And then you would change this. Okay. But anytime you change even just one little point of the rules, the style that we see in the sport becomes very different. Now, what style do we see in MMA? The rule set is very broad. Probably it is the most broad rule set as far as combat sports goes. And so there is a lot of wiggle room for different styles, if you will, different stylistic tendencies to appear. And when I say styles in this context, I'm not talking about, like the style of Kyokushin karate or the style of Kodokan judo or the style of whatever, right? I'm talking about what we actually see, how people move, like a movement fingerprint. Right? And you can probably look at somebody who is trained in the karate style that you have. And look at their movement fingerprint and be like, yeah, that guy's trained in the same style.
That's a karate guy. Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can probably see a Taekwondo guy and think, man, that's a Taekwondo guy, right?
So, yeah, that's definitely a Taekwondo guy.
All right. And if you look at movement tendencies in the sport of mixed martial arts, they have changed a lot in the last 20 years since the sport's inception. I mean, it's been more than that since when did the UFC start? 1993? Was that at 93, 94?
That sounds right. Yeah.
It sounds right. But it was a while ago, right? It was a while
Yeah.
ago. But the sport has changed dramatically. I mean, UFC 1, nobody knew what they were doing. Gracie knew how to grapple, nobody else did, and so he submitted them. So it looked like Jiu Jitsu against day one white belts who were really big, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And then for a while, it looked like wrestlers taking people down, laying in their guard, and squishing them.
Squishing them, ground and pounding. Yep.
And then it kind of looked like everybody was a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and so they start canceling each other in kickboxing and sometimes grappling a little bit.
Right.
And now it looks like all kinds of different things.
Yeah, a lot of cage work and
Yes. So we are seeing tons of grappling up against the cage right now. Because people are starting to realize it's the final frontier, at least the one we recognize of mixed martial arts at this point,
exactly.
Right? So the stylistic tendencies are changing as our understanding of the limitations of the sport increase.
Yeah.
So it is so important to understand the limitations of the sport in order to, I guess you can say, create your own style, if you will. One of my favorite coaches, shout out to Dan Lucart. He runs Brea Jiu Jitsu in Brea, California.
Nice.
He ran this in-house jiu-jitsu tournament, and I went there and I competed with them. I rolled with those guys. Great group of guys to run to do jiu-jitsu with. But during this tournament, I was watching Dan coach some of his grapplers, and Dan is so good at understanding the rules and the limitations of jiu-jitsu, like down to the nitty-gritty advantage points, disadvantage points, etc. Or what do they call those? Disadvantage points? Penalty points. That's it, right?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, so one of his grapplers is going at it, and Dan, about a minute in, says, "Now you are losing. What you need to do is this, this, and this in order to get the advantage point."
Yeah.
And I had never heard a coach tell their fighter, "Now you are losing."
Yeah, right. So clearly, too. Like, no messing around.
But it was the most effective instruction I have ever seen a coach give. Now you are losing, so this is what you need to do. It reminded me of way back when, early on in my MMA coaching career. I was coaching a guy, and he was a little bit behind on the scorecard, but I was trying to give him positive reinforcement. And I sent him back in for the next round. And this guy who was helping me corner, he said, "He's losing this fight. We need to let him know that." And I was thinking, no, we need to build up positivity and all that. And he was absolutely right. We needed to let him know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what does this have to do with limitations and styles? I was going somewhere with this. Hold on.
I think I have an idea.
This is what I do, Seth. You've opened up a dangerous can of worms. I go on hour-long tirades about things. And sometimes I circle back to them. You said you had an idea.
Yes. So I feel like what you're saying is because it is more sport-based, that even your current situation in the fight has an effect on your style. Like your purpose, your goal within the fight changes even from round to round based off of how many points you've scored, how your opponent has done, what your opponent's doing, stuff like that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. The scoring system shapes the sport. In fact, that's such a hot point of contention right now in the MMA community, is the scoring system, like the 10-point must system of boxing that has been adopted into MMA is weird, man. It is really
very weird.
And I've judged a ton of professional fights in my life, and it's weird. It is super weird. This it's even weird for boxing in my estimation, but extra weird for MMA. And different organizations like ONE FC, they score all the rounds as one, like it's they just score the fight as one thing. And so the fights look different. They're notably different than the UFC. And a lot of people think, well, it's just because they're Asian fighters from striking backgrounds primarily, and so that's why we're seeing this. But I would argue it's more than that. It's the scoring system.
Yeah, you learn to win, right?
Yeah. It's interesting if you look at, say, George St. Pierre early on in his career compared to late in his career. He's a completely different fighter.
Very different.
And not just because he acquired a different skill set, right? Early on in his career, I think he was like, take his first fight against Matt Hughes. Where he lost that fight via armbar, but before that, it almost looked like he was trying to feature his karate. He wanted to show that cool spinning back kick, and he did, and he made it look really cool. He won me over as a fan in that fight, even though he lost.
Yeah.
Okay. But he did these very high risk, high reward techniques. Okay. And early on in fighters' careers, they often do that because they have to get recognized.
Yeah, right.
You look at him later in his career, it's all about managing the scorecard.
Yep, decision wins, a lot of them. Yeah.
Yes. And he's very capable of doing the high risk, high reward stuff. But what he did, manage the scorecard.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily the most interesting thing. Like George St. Pierre, people say he's the best wrestler in the history of MMA. But if you look at his whole game plan, what was it? It was 2 takedowns, the double leg and the single leg. It was 2 finishes for each takedown. It was 2 guard passes. And that's pretty much it. But he just did them so
efficiently.
Good plan A, good solid plan B, right? But he used that game plan to milk the scorecard. Okay, and that is what created that style. That style that ended up winning him all those championship titles. Okay,
that's very similar to I believe it's Tim Ferriss. Oh man, 4-Hour Work Week. Have you ever heard of the book?
No. Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Work Week. Okay.
4-Hour Work Week. In this book, he talks about how he entered into a kickboxing tournament where he knew very little about kickboxing. Who knows if this is true? It seems a little Frank Dukes, but we'll see. So he claimed he entered this tournament with very little experience, but he found a loophole in the ruling where if the person falls off of the ring, like it was a square, like very blood sporty. It was a square.
Like a late tie.
Yeah. If they step off of the ring 10 times, they lose.
10 times, okay.
And so his, or maybe it was less, I think it was 10. So what he would do is he would just walk down opponents with a high guard, teeps, until they eventually fell off the thing 10 times. And apparently he won without a single knockdown, with very few landed strikes. But then what happened is they just changed the rules so that like it wouldn't favor that anymore. But that's another good example of like how the rule set is just something that people would use to figure out how to win and change it with those
like,
limitations.
Old school Sunda on the Muay Thai platform, it's an open raised platform. You throw the other guy off, and I don't remember if it was an automatic win or just points. But then there was professional Sunda in a boxing ring, and that changed it completely.
Everything, yeah, right.
Yeah, if you get close to the corner and you can win by throwing the other guy off the platform, cool. You're going to build your whole strategy around that.
Yeah.
But if suddenly the platform is surrounded by ropes, now boxing, kickboxing strategies are going to come into play a whole lot more.
MMA is not a style in the most simple statement you can make. MMA is not a style because...
Okay, MMA is... Okay, style is a codified series of movement. It is a canon of movement. For example, in Shotokan karate, that is a style because I can show you very specific forms. This is a movement from Shotokan, right? That is a movement from Shotokan. That is a movement from Shotokan, and so on, right? And if I show you, let's say, a movement from Capoeira that does not exist in the syllabus of Shotokan, it's not Shotokan anymore. It's Capoeira, right?
Sure. Yep.
So a style has a closed canon of movement. A combat sport like MMA, now it has a specific rule set, but it doesn't have a closed canon of movement. So you can use techniques from Shotokan, you can use techniques from Capoeira or Judo or whatever, right? Or make up your own crazy style if you want to, and use that, right? You don't have to limit yourself in the octagon outside of the fouls of the sport. So a style is a codified series of movement.
Yeah.
A combat sport is a set of parameters in which you can fight.
Okay.
When I say that out loud, it kind of sounds like a similar thing, but they're kind of like equal and opposite things.
Yeah. So so martial arts or mixed martial arts is an empty chalkboard where you bring your own like colored chalk, and like everybody's writing with chalk, but like yours is a different color. You might have different handwriting. Where a style is you are essentially trying to make your writing look as similar as possible to the person who's teaching you the writing. Like you're tracing it almost.
Yeah, man.
I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel that's like the closest, that's like the most in my brain thing I could come up with.
You know, I almost feel like retracting what I just said about defining styles, because within a style itself, you can have sub-styles, for example.
Yep.
Yeah, take boxing.
Mm-hmm.
You could say boxing is a style. It's also a combat sport, but you could say it's a style because it does have a codified series of movement. These punches, these slips, etc. If you throw a kick, that's not boxing anymore. Not in the modern world anyway.
Right.
But there are different styles of boxing.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the way, say, Russian boxers train, it's different than the way Cuban boxers train. Yeah. Which is different than the way American boxers train. And even within those communities, we got cliques that train differently, right?
Right, yeah. You got the Mayweathers, you've got,
Yeah, same thing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We might say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a style. And yet, if you go to any different set of gyms, right?
Yeah.
Like last time I was in the U.S., I visited as many different jiu-jitsu gyms as I could, because it's what I like to do. I'd like to visit different gyms, right? Learn all I can from them. And I remember there were these two jiu-jitsu gyms, like within spitting distance of each other. And the style was so different. The style of teaching, the style of combat, the tendencies everybody did. At one gym, it was all about collar sleeve control. And their whole style was use that to take the back. It was all about this very specific game plan.
Yeah.
And at the other one, it was all about playing open guard.
Yeah.
And that's all anybody ever did, right? And then you go to this other gym, and it's all about smash and squish and wrestle and be on top and, be aggressive and oppressive.
Sure.
And, these are all things you can do at any jiu-jitsu gym. But again, you're going to find very different pragmatic applications within the same style.
That's true. But to be fair, you would still, if you saw any of those, you would still say, oh, that's jiu-jitsu.
True. Exactly.
And I think the same thing would happen with boxing. But I think if I did anything other than like against the cage wrestling, then you could have any answer for it. Like that's boxing, that's karate, that's jiu-jitsu, that's freestyle.
And so people want to see a style in MMA. If we were to call MMA a style, or even see styles in MMA, really all we're doing is projecting. We're projecting our belief system onto the sport, if you will.
Yeah, right. I think you're right. So the answer is, one of the most frequent questions I get are people who are like, hey, I take karate, I don't want to anymore, which is really funny as like a karate channel. But I get it as someone who's taken karate and has taken a bunch of other stuff. And I thought you might